Hi there, this is Tanzil Bakari from Double Verify. I'm the Managing Director for EMEA. And we're here to talk about lessons that we've learned from 2020 and those both opportunities and challenges we had in that year. What are the opportunities to drive performance in 2021? Okay, so one of the challenges that we had in 2020 was really focused around three things, and these things are essentially should be taken as learnings. What we've done in 2020 has been both a tumultuous year, but a phenomenal year for the industry. We continue to operate and scale. We saw a significant amount of shift in the way that consumers were consuming content, where they were doing it, how they were doing it, on what devices they were doing it. We saw a significant sort of implication to the consumer privacy trends. So the introduction over the last couple of years of GDPR, CCPA in the States, but also we saw the inability for us to really engage in an audience targeting mechanism, given the potential sunset of third-party cookies going away in 2022. And then finally, with the challenges that we saw last year with the pandemic, with Black Lives Matter, with the US elections, with Brexit, there was an unprecedented news cycle, and the ability to live in that environment, which was a significantly complex environment. Where we ended up was the challenges that we have, the technologies and processes that we had struggled to keep up with it. And so what we really needed was the ability to evolve to a more sophisticated tool set. And so those learnings really drive us into 2021. One of the challenges that we came across was in this new ecosystem, how do we ensure that we're still driving successful campaigns? And from a Double Verify perspective, one thing that became very clear for our customers was this need to ensure that you're able to build a successful campaign across quality content, quality media, and media that drives performance. A combination of those two, those two things really helps drive success. It goes without saying, but from our perspective at DV, the four components of media quality that we're most focused on are essentially fraud and SIVT. Ultimately, was the ad actually seen by a human being? Brand safety and suitability. Was the content that the ad appeared against or next to aligned with the brand values that the client had? Viewability. Was the actual ad viewable? Well, it'd be pointless advertising if you're not able to see the ad. And then finally, somewhat undervalued, but was it in the right geo? News content and news stories and alignment to those news stories has got to be important. So a combination of these four things helps drive quality. And so as we move forward, this changing media and consumption landscape, what we've seen is there's a lot of challenges that we've faced and a lot of challenges that we'll continue to try to resolve, but there's many opportunities. And one of the biggest opportunities is actually driving innovation. And we see 2021 really being a key year for us to focus on these three areas. Powering performance in a cookieless world. We have to, as an industry, prepare ourselves that when cookies go away, we still have to engage with our audiences, and we have to engage with the right audiences. The way that people are consuming content has evolved. Video is significantly is a significant medium through which people are able to convey both their messages and their ideas. But where they're consuming those videos is changing. Mediums such as CTV have seen a significant growth in 2020, and so we'll talk a little bit about those. And then finally, we can't stay too far away from this concept of brand safety and suitability. Irrespective of how the mediums change, the needs to ensure that we have consistent but new standards and controls for brand safety and suitability is more imperative than ever. So as we go through these three things, let's start with the privacy performance in a cookieless world. We have we have we've seen the concerns, and the concerns are rightfully there, focused around user privacy across big tech. And so this isn't new news to us now. GDPR has been around for over 2 years, and as a CCPA. So, what's happening as a result of this shift is essentially the development of a more privacy-friendly ecosystem. We saw that 83% of internet users worldwide said they were concerned about their privacy, and it was a really it was a wake-up call for the industry to essentially drive significant change. The privacy regulations from many of the European and American and just generally regulators all over the world and their governments, introduced specific regulations, things like GDPR and CCPA, that limit the advertiser's ability to target those users based on a specific or an individual audience profile. And then, to top it all off, we saw a significant shift in sort of the approach that browsers were taking. Safari and Firefox have over the last year and a half made changes to the way that they're enabling and allowing sort of third-party cookies. Essentially, they've done away with them. Chrome still allow it, but have announced that they will also stop supporting third-party cookies to target to target consumers across Chrome by middle of next year. So we have to prepare and we have to find ways to overcome these challenges and recognize these as more opportunities moving forward. So from a DV perspective, when we looked at this and we said, right, okay, there is, what are the tools available out there that allow people to still have a good understanding of their target audience and their wants and likes and dislikes. And so, we make the case for contextual. In a recent study that we did, we found that 69% of those respondents would be more likely to look at an ad if it was relevant to the content they were reading. This sounds very obvious, but the fact that we still target individual users rather than looking at the content is something that that will need to change. 67% of those respondents were open to viewing relevant ads from new brands as long as they were in the right environment. And probably the most impressive stat here is 44% of those respondents have tried a new brand due to seeing a relevant ad alongside a piece of content they were consuming. It's testament to the fact that having the right ad in the right place makes the right difference. And in this case, the content is making that difference. And so when we look at contextual and the landscape that it sort of applies against, before we talk about the benefits of contextual, let's talk about sort of what are the options available. We have the standard IAB tier 1, tier 2 categories, right? So this is everything that we've used in the last few years. We've seen a lot of publishers and a lot of environments move towards more of a behavioral or supplemental structure where they're verticalizing the content into autos and vehicles and consumer electronics, for example. And so the content is relevant to in-market audiences. We've seen a number of environments that have been created to focus on seasonal categories, right? So how do we target content that is Halloween related or Black Friday related? And increasingly so, we've seen a lot of brands focus on creating their own categories. And so, in this scenario, they're able to leverage DoubleVerify's contextual concepts. We have over 200,000 of these. And the combination of which will create unique, custom, brand-specific categories for those particular brands. So the landscape has evolved, the technology has evolved, the innovation in this space has really driven new opportunities. And so contextual, we think, sort of gives you a number of opportunities, a number of benefits. It ensures accurate content classification, so the brand suitability and targeting is on point. It's consumer privacy friendly. It extends reach, so it's not limiting to just the people that you know, but it allows you to target broader audiences. It allows, whilst you're targeting those broader audiences, it still allows for a certain amount of precision when it comes to those users and those audiences and where they are in their buying journey. And then finally, and I think this is one of the biggest reasons why we're in this situation today in a cookieless world, it reduces ad fatigue. The viewer only sees the ad in the right context, and so therefore it doesn't annoy them. It doesn't seem as though it's following them around. So in a privacy consumer, in a privacy consumer or privacy friendly way, should I say? I think the performance element in a post-cookie world still looks very positive with contextual. So moving on to CTV and video, I think video, we'll all agree, is a medium that has continued to grow over the years and has fast become one of the most powerful mediums to tell your brand story. Right, the combination of sight, sound, and motion really allows you to engage and tell a story worth telling for all consumers. But when we apply this concept into new environments, it's also interesting to see how CTV has evolved. We've seen 82% of respondents and the predictions here by 2023, 82% of people or households will have some form of a CTV device. Already 50% of households in Europe have some form of CTV viewership, 61.5 million. And I think the key stat for all of us here is 53% of advertisers are already shifting spend from TV to CTV, and also from digital video to CTV. So as CTV grows, we see this ecosystem starting to take shape. But as that ecosystem grows, so do the challenges with it. And as a verification company, one of the things that we've seen in this, as CTV continues to grow, is the level of fraud, just the size and the impact that it has across the businesses. Over the last year, 225% year-on-year increase in fraudulent CTV impressions that we've captured. That's across over 1,300 CTV apps in the last 12 months. And a scary stat for all intents and purposes is over 500,000 different devices are detected every single day that are responsible for some form of fraud within CTV. And so when we look at this and this growing medium, which is from an impression perspective, quite an expensive environment, right? So the average CPMs in the CTV environments are actually very high. It's actually it's imperative that we ask ourselves, really, why has it been so difficult to get that complete picture? And it comes down to these four things. There's been an inconsistency around the technology and standards that we've sort of enabled, both from the broadcasters as well as from the digital ecosystem and generally across the advertising ecosystem. The inconsistency of measurement data that we're passing between providers. We're tracking the same thing differently, which leads to a lot of confusion. In most digital ecosystems, brands are now more comfortable advertising in a lot of these environments simply because they have the ability, they have the control to determine when and where they advertise. And so the fact that CTV doesn't, it's not universally available to block in a CTV environment has caused a lot of concern, a lot of problems for brands to really engage in that space. And then finally, because of this new evolving ecosystem, the way that we've integrated technologies and the way that we've tried to implement campaigns has been very, very inefficient. The operational inefficiencies, the number of tags that you have to create and map together has created a lot of angst, as it were, with brands and marketers and their agencies. And so we need to find an easier way to engage in the CTV world. And so when we've looked at this as a company, 2020 was a year that really brought a lot of our strategy, a lot of our focus on CTV into perspective. We've developed reports and reporting that enables a greater level of transparency across CTV. We've developed an ability to include and exclude certain apps and certain environments based on whatever your requirements are. And probably one of our biggest innovations from last year is a feature called video filtering. It's available within our Video Complete solution, and we're more than happy to engage with anybody who wants to have more information. But it's essentially the ability for brands and their representatives to apply some form of blocking in a CTV environment. And so, I mean, as a major innovation and a major breakthrough in that space, we continue to build on that in 2021. We want to drive a more granular level of control. So we want to get to the app levels, and within the app levels, focus on things like star ratings and user reviews and so forth. And then finally, the way that we're classifying and targeting these environments in CTV has to improve. And so the content level classification and avoidance is something that we're actively working on. We'll see further innovation as we go through 2021. And then, so finally, the third area that we talked about up front was, the need for us to maintain brand safety and suitability as an ecosystem. Brands are still concerned, in this, this news cycle and the evolving news cycle that we have, that we still need to make sure that brands have the ability to engage with consumers in an environment that they feel doesn't have a negative impact on their brands. And so, when we look at stats like this in a survey that we did in the last year or so, 73% of those respondents said they would react negatively to ads adjacent to inflammatory content. 67% of them said they would stop using a brand product that appeared next to false or objectionable content. These stats are scary for brands, and so as they engage in new environments, as they engage in the industry as a whole, brand safety and suitability becomes a significant part of both their concern and the opportunity to engage with them. So when we look at brand safety and brand suitability, we feel that it's becoming more nuanced. There isn't a one size fits all approach anymore. It's very much down to either in an industry or in a vertical, but more often than not, it's actually at a brand level. Those complex news topics that dominate headlines, the content isn't always good, it's not always bad. And that traditional sort of brand safety tools or mechanisms that we've used, things like keywords blocking or inclusion or exclusion lists, they're just not enough to really allow brands to differentiate and be sort of clear on what's important to them. And so, as we work through the next couple of years, and as we work through the digital ecosystem as a whole, what becomes extremely important is sort of why, what becomes extremely important is understanding the need to do this. The brand suitability rates that we're seeing are there's a significant change, right? We're seeing that monitoring is up. We're seeing brands are becoming more aware of the need to understand where they're advertising, but more importantly, leverage that information to allow them to better target where they end up. A combination of those two things has really led to the stats that you see here. They're becoming more sophisticated in how they're using brand safety tools, and they're defining who they feel are their trusted publishers. And the net result of this is we're seeing a significant decrease. There's been a 3% overall decrease in block rates when it comes to through their brand safety and brand suitability settings. And although the in-app and block rates have increased, mobile, web, and desktop have decreased. And I think that's the important piece that we want to make sure people recognize is, as you build these nuanced profiles, not only do you protect yourself better, but you're also able to go better target the consumers and the audiences that you want to. So how do you build a more nuanced brand safety profile? And so we believe this sort of happens in 4 phases. The first is the brand safety floor. This is any content that sort of more or less every brand wants to avoid under all circumstances, and it's everything that you would normally expect, right? It's content that is inflammatory or is there's a range of categories, but the content is stuff that you just definitely do not want to be appearing against as a brand. And people like and entities like the 4As in the States and the GARM have created these standards. So applying them to your brand safety floor is important. Brand suitability is aligning your the content that is most relevant for you, right? So as a brand, what is your unique proposition, and having those categories, and we have 89 of them across DV, to allow you to be able to develop your own suitability standards, to ensure that you're calibrating these across regional classifications. The sensitivities in some regions, let's take Saudi Arabia as an example. The regional sensitivities in that country are going to be fundamentally different to the Western world. So having the ability to do that is important. And then recognizing that, it's not a set it and forget it approach. You have to have responsive adjustments. You've got to be able to make changes on the fly depending on whether something has come out regarding your brand, your industry, or generally there's a pandemic, and so you need to be more aware of what's happening. So building a brand safety profile is important, and once again, we're happy to discuss with anybody that has wants a better understanding. So to finish up, what are the key takeaways? What do we think that as part of this presentation and as we go into 2021, we feel brands and agencies need to look at? The first is quality measurement across all media buys. This concept of quality has to become more of a currency that brands and agencies and publishers start to engage and trade against. Because once you're able to build those quality guidances and standards, driving media performance becomes significantly easier. There's a tremendous brand value in CTV as a premium channel. So we're openly engaging with our clients and discussing ways that we're able to help them on that CTV journey. Brand safety and verification controls as a third takeaway are just as important in CTV as they are in traditional display, and especially when protecting against fraud. It's as we move into new mediums, we need to learn from the mistakes that we made as an industry across previous mediums and all the other mediums that we use, so that we continue to evolve and we continue to get better. Contextual targeting is a fourth. It helps reduce the dependency on third-party cookies. It increases market efficiency and allows a certain amount of accuracy when it comes to targeting precision. I think contextual targeting is going to only grow this year. And so being part of that journey is going to be important. And then finally, for all brands, ensure that the brand safety profile that you're using, with your agency, with your partners, is tailored to your brand values. It's understanding what those values are globally, regionally, and locally, and making sure that you have the technology that allows you to apply them in order to strike that right balance between giving you protection and enabling scale. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to the team. We're more than happy to engage and explain any of the slides or any of the content that we have on here. Wish everybody a successful 2021, and I'm looking forward to the innovation and where we end up at the end of this year. Thank you for listening.